Hello all, we continue our journey where we left you in Broome, our last big multicultural hub and town before the Gib River Road. Our first sightseeing at Paspaley, part responsible for Broome's big thing, pearls. Couple showrooms later, we had brushed up on history, the practical details of the pearl farming industry, pearl farming boats, and of course, pearl farming gear. We got a look at some record-breakingly large pearls and Aboriginal shell art. A trip down to the old docks gave us a sense of where the pearl farmers used to leave from, out into the croc-infested mangroves that surround the city's eastern coast. What pearl farmers do on their time off turns out to be watch movies, as we visited Sun Pictures, an outdoor cinema that showed its first film back in 1933. After a quick bite to eat and an important discussion over the acceptable level of beans a single person should eat, we head over to Broome's western coast to Cable Beach and took to the sand with the camels. Parked up and with camels in view, we had a little time to wander the shoreline before things turned golden and we enjoyed our picture-perfect Broome sunset dinner, complete with sailboat. After dark, with the tide all the way out, we did decide to do a little treasure hunting for the elusive dino footprints that are another of the natural wonders of this part of the world. Once we'd found the GPS coordinates, the digging began. Deeper and deeper we dug, but alas, we could not find them, so head to bed. Disappointed with last night's hunt, we tried another point further down the coast, where the tide didn't have to be quite so far out. So we clambered down the red rocky outcrops, and now we did find something that Holly wasn't sure was a footprint, but I'm going to call it as a stegosaur foot. Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. On the way back, we passed the casts of the more iconic footprints that are found further out at lower tides, and continued our journey inland with Holly's keen eyes spotting our first modern day dinosaur, as we made our way to some friends in Derby. Of course, another dog, Pumpkin the piggy, and Kermit the frog were there to greet us, although we did move Kermit, to be honest. And after a quick dip in the pool, we spent the evening prepping for the journey ahead and trying to catch up with some video scripts before calling it a night. The next day, we tackled our biggest challenge yet, the Gib River Road. Almost 2 weeks of limited signal, limited fuel, and isolated outback roads. Without overthinking it too much, we arrived at our first stop, Windjana Gorge, a solid rock wall that rose out of the surroundings, and after a short walk through the wall, we were in the gorge itself. Now I want to prefix this whole Gib section with there is going to be a lot of awesome gorges coming up, but hopefully you don't get too gorged out. We also got to see our first couple of freshwater crocodiles sunning themselves on the far bank of the river. Next, it was time to head further down the ridge to Tunnel Creek, a famous holdout for one of the final strongholds of Aboriginal resistance against the colonials, but with the added intrigue of freshwater crocodiles in the dark. Without giving too much time to process, we clambered down into the cave and wandered deep into the darkness. And soon it became very dark indeed. And all we had was our torchlight to guide us. And there they were, lying in the darkest corners of the cave, freshies lying up on the ledges. Luckily, the light was at the end of the tunnel, and we made it out the other side to warm up in the sun before having to head back through the cave at a quick pace and back onto the road to a warm tent, bed, and a film. The next day, we hit the corrugations again, past uncanny rocks akin to Queen Victoria, over ridges and through valleys, and a few rivers for good measure, till we reached our next stop, Leonard Gorge. This deep, narrow gorge is unique in having opposite rock faces made from different types of stone. So after clambering down and having a look at the falls, we clambered up and head back down along the river to the car and to the foothills of Marchfly Glen, and took the time to explore the camp and the nearby creek before a fireside dinner. The next morning, treated by a stretch of tarmac and a couple more river crossings, we head off to Bell Gorge, possibly the most popular of all the gorges along the Gibb. Our first stop was the infinity-esque swimming hole at the top of the falls. As we peered down the rolling falls, we were visited by one of the local water monitors coming down to the water's edge for a bask in the sunlight, although always keeping half an eye on us. In the stream, Holly noticed little fish swimming around our toes before we moved like water to the bottom of the falls for a swim in the main pool and a shower under the cascade. After a relax and a bite to eat, we head downstream with a swim and a waddle across the slippery rocks, heading towards the river's end. With more spectacular swimming holes and little falls, we slowly made our way down, and with me being sent ahead on regular intervals for croc checks. After announcing the all clear, we finally made it to a large lower falls before calling it a day and making the return journey back across the river to our camp in the valley, where we were met by the strangest insect I'd seen in a long while, with what I'm going to identify as a nymph plant hopper. I also must be pretty lucky, or so the saying goes, I'm told, before a wipe down and calling it a night. Another day, another gorge. We set off across another rocky creek bed until we made our way to the lily pad filled creek, which we traced until we reached Adcock Gorge, with a massive multi-tiered waterfall covered in countless roots from the fig trees. I had to explore the top, so I head up the falls, eventually making it to the top to take in the view down to the turquoise pool at the bottom. But with many a gorge left to see that day, we head back to Pingu and bumped our way onto the main road down to Galvin's Gorge, yet another picturesque oasis of turquoise water, red rocks, and tiered falls. We enjoyed the water and enjoyed some downtime, and while Holly got into her book, I caught up with some of the locals hanging out on the water's edge. We also stumbled into some Aboriginal artwork, and with a bit of persuading, both went up the falls on a bushwalk to take in the views from the top. Then it was back on the road to camp, where we called it a night. The next morning, we discovered possums had had a disco on our dinner table, but packed up for an early morning river crossing and hour-long hike to Manning Gorge. We eventually found the creek and made our way to the falls, where we got a chance to cool off and swim under the falls with another shower. Of course, with another falls, I found a way to scramble up to the top to take in the views before opting for the quick gravity-assisted route back down into the swimming hole. With a hike and a swim back to the start, ferrying our stuff across the river, we got back into the car, continuing the journey east, stopping at the one and only Gibb River. We set up camp above the partially dry riverbed, and as it was early in the morning, we went for a wander down the tree-lined creek and got an early bed after sunset for the long journey north tomorrow. The next morning, we head off northward, only slowing for river and a dingo before noticing a burning tree, so we pulled over to try and stop the burn. Now, in hindsight, this was very overcautious of us, but we'd not come across a fire before and thought it was the right thing to do. After stopping the smoke, we continued our journey, and the scenery soon started to turn more tropical, with trees giving way to palms. Soon, we tackled probably our deepest river crossing yet, but made it across safely, with the water really only just reaching the bottom of the doors at about 70 centimeters at the deepest point. That was when we hit the muddy trails of the north, and struggling to identify where Pingu ended and the tracks began, his white and black taking on a more monotone reddish brown, just in time for us to arrive in camp after a long day's drive. The next day, we set off on a hike all the way up to Mitchell Falls, a 6-hour trek past streams filled with lily pads and countless waterfalls into deep valleys, with little dragons basking on rocks. We eventually made it up to the top where all the heli tours had landed, and after a short walk, we arrived to an overhang to take in the full view of the falls, all 4 tiers of it, complete with rainbow at the bottom. Next, it was time for a dip, so we wandered past the wraparound second waterfall until we reached the top and lay cooling off in the fast-flowing stream with the froggies. After we'd cooled down, we started the return journey past some Aboriginal artwork depicting hunts and ceremonies. Next, we made our way to Little Mertons Falls, where we sat to have our lunch. After that, we decided to do a little explore under the waterfall overhang in search for more Aboriginal artwork. And way up high, deep under the overhang, we found it. A huge wall covered in art with figures, serpents, and animals, covering a large stretch, almost 4 meters of wall, hidden completely from view by the trees. This was really, really cool, and did fulfill a bit of an Indiana Jones fantasy of discovering ancient art deep in the forest after scrambling over boulders, and on the way out found another sneaky painting hidden under a boulder as we left for a well-earned sit-down by the campfire.